Hello, I'm Kat Finch and welcome to the latest episode of the ServiceNow UK&I Executive Circle podcast series. Within our podcast, we speak to some of the industry's most exciting innovators, thought leaders and senior executives, all with the aim of giving you, our listeners, the inspiration, insights and market intelligence you need to help drive your organisation forward. So welcome to today's ServiceNow Executive Circle podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Pearson, CIO of Ricoh Europe. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you. Hello, Kat.
It's great that you can join us today, but before we get into the conversation, let's just start with a little bit of who you are, your role, and what does Ricoh Europe do?
Sure. So lovely to be with you. So my role is I look after technology for the whole of Ricoh EMEA. So Ricoh is a global company. We provide digital workspace and workspace technology to over, I think, about 2.5 million people across Europe. And I'm lucky enough to look after a technology team, about 250 people that support all of that across all of our countries across Europe.
Amazing. So with that connection, obviously, across Europe, you're obviously talking to a lot of your customers, a lot of your peers, a lot of other industry leaders. What's sort of, happening out there at the moment? What's the general tone and sentiment about the macro trends that are sort of impacting businesses across Europe today?
I think it's complex, is the quick answer. Ricoh at the minute and other companies, we're looking at headwinds like the tariffs that have hit us. We manufacture products over in Asia, ship them all over the world. We're looking at topics like technology and margins. So Ricoh, like many companies, is shifting to a services business, which is great in many ways, from traditional manufacturing into service. But margins are a very challenging business, or a different way of running the business. And then I think zooming more into Europe, you've got some of the challenges we're all facing now on tax and rates and everything else. So I think the overall mood is super mixed, depending on the time of day and the time of project you're on. And I think productivity and how we basically encourage growth whilst mixing all of that together is a constant conundrum for me and the board at the moment.
Definitely. And I can imagine part of the difficulty of tackling that is how can you continue sort of digital technology transformation when you are trying to prove the margins, prove the ROI and the value you're trying to drive from that, and getting that balance? Is that something that you're sort of constantly sort of tackling?
Yes, we are. In many ways, it's not new news. So in many ways, it's very similar to what we've been doing as technology leaders for many years. We've been trying to modernize. And we have to modernise because we have to bring new capabilities to the business. And how do you sweat the asset, what we've already got? And on the other hand, look for real innovation that actually drives growth. So I think in many ways it's similar to what we have been doing for many years, but we're really zooming in now on a win-wins. So where can we really reinvent what we already do and get that little bit of growth extra to balance things out? That's what's becoming more condensed than it was previously.
You talk about recent history and your win-wins, but actually Ricoh has been on a transformation journey for more than 20 years. And the company has completely sort of pivoted, and you've been fantastic at doing that with the changes of how people run their businesses, how people work in the workplace. You've had to be agile and pivot. Talk us through that kind of history of transformation for Ricoh.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why I joined Ricoh is I used to be a customer of Ricoh for many years. So in my previous lives, I was looking at companies like Ricoh to help me as a CIO, help me transform what I was doing in the workplace. So Ricoh, like a few other companies as well, were saying, how can we help businesses be more successful in running their workplaces? And Ricoh's got a really interesting heritage over many years, been around for over 80 years now. Innovative company with products, so it's even starting from lenses and reprographic systems and faxes and printers. And then you start pivoting that to transformation and saying, well, actually, I need an output from a device, but actually what's more interesting these days is I need to do something with that output. So then you move into document storage conversations, then workflow conversations, and saying even now sentiment conversations. So I don't care what it is and what I've developed and what workflow I have, I actually care what I should do with it. So Ricoh's tried to go along those paths along the way. And as we come out of all now reimagining workplace, everyone's saying, well, what can I now do with the real estate I have and the place we have to encourage people into a great workplace?
So when you were at your previous companies, you saw Ricoh's transformation, thought, I need to be there to support?
Yeah, we were really looking at previous companies. We were really looking to go, where do I need to build my expertise? And where can I use others who are good at this already and bring expertise? Where do I want people to come in with a great vision for how a workplace should be and digitalise that, well, I can concentrate also on other areas that are of more interest to the business I was running. So workplaces is a great example where, whether it be audiovisual, meeting rooms, communication services, small and medium businesses as well that don't have great big IT departments or great big kind of facilities teams, how do they get an experience that's great for them without having to invest in all those things?
I mean, we've all got examples of companies that we've seen over the years, sadly, not be able to adapt to the changes that the world has seen. As a CIO, do you get frustrated when you look at them and think, why didn't you make that decision? Why didn't you pivot and adapt and embrace some of the new technology?
I think it's really tough. The more, I think what's tough about the pivot is the pivot can be painful. And in technology, you see it with previous companies around the world, with technology companies as well. To a certain degree, you have to have a really tough conversation, potentially about cannibalizing your as-is to get to the future. So you hear it in retail, used to work a lot in retail. In the retail business, you have to stop doing what, to a certain degree, actually is your cash cow and what's driving your business in order to pivot. And that's a super tough conversation, even more now so with margins, because you haven't got that growth to offset the pivot. Is it frustrating? Yes, but I think the world's designed a little bit to be disruptive. So I think the world of business in particular is not super tolerant of people that aren't willing to pivot or don't pivot. And I think that's something that's just becoming more acute.
As consumers, we're very vocal when things don't work. I mean, COVID was that massive pivotal moment, especially for retailers. They had to make those changes, and we were not going to be quiet, go quietly into the night.
I don't think businesses are willing to wait for businesses to pivot, because the disruption will go with that. And the what used to be what we called the cost of change, that lock-in, is becoming less so in certain areas now. And I'm sure we'll go on to talk about AI and those kind of capabilities, but with those capabilities that can abstract from the way you run the business, it becomes easier to pivot.
So it's still focusing on sort of history of Ricoh and that transformation journey that you've been on. What challenges did the business overcome that you could sort of turn into advice for other CIO and other businesses who are perhaps still going through that pivotal change?
And I think we are as well. That's the first thing I would say. I'd say I think I see this every single day at micro and macro level. So I think sometimes you can think about the change being the whole company and the whole region and the whole business, but you can also see it within departments and within functions. We're trying to, and I try to stop talking about transformation, and we talk a lot more now about who's driving the change that we want to make. So how are we bringing the right people into this? And I see a lot of learnings in Ricoh that I've experienced elsewhere where we potentially had the wrong people driving the wrong change. So a lot of the conversations we're having is, have we got the right people driving the change? So we're not even talking about the strategy or the technology or the cost of change. We're talking about the visionaries and the people, the game changers that can do something different in the way they run. Because that's where I've seen previously the best energy has been from the people that are willing to change and have a vision for that change. And then we support those people with the visions and behind those things. And I think Ricoh's been pretty good at that. I think there's areas, again, of the business segmentation that's difficult, because there's areas where we support very small and medium business that have a very different requirement from us than a large corporate multinational business. And I think we have areas of our technology that's very static, that just needs to do its job and work, versus areas where people are willing to risk areas of innovation. So I think it's quite nuanced. But we are trying to use transformation less as a word and more about backing people to change things.
Yeah, I agree. So I think transformation is one of those words, but it makes you think you've transformed, it's done. It's never done, is it? It's a constant, and we probably just need to make a shift to that word.
It's funny, isn't it? Because we hear it a lot internally, and everyone hears it in their own organisations. Is after post-change curves, people go, "Is that it now? Are we done? We're not getting any more announcements." And I think it's unsettling for a certain amount, and the constant change is constant, and I think it is getting quicker. But that ability for those that want to change with it is also becoming super empowering.
Yeah,
because it's throwing out some of the models that we can do differently.
And so focusing on the here and the now, we can't not have a conversation around AI, generative AI, agentic AI, because that is the technology of now, tied into that transformation piece, tied into the people piece as well, that kind of human and artificial intelligence. What sort of Ricoh and as CIO, your perspective on AI today and where it's going?
Yes, this will be a quick answer. No, I think there's a couple of ways I'd describe it. CIO-wise, I think we are trying to position ourselves and give clarity to the board about what the AI capabilities are available. So I think a lot of boards are looking to the CIO community to say, help me understand this, help me put my arms around some platform choices that we need to make. There's an analogy I'm using at the minute around the old GPS systems that we had. So we all had GPS in the car, and we had TomToms, and we had that. But it wasn't until we put all that together into a kind of Google Maps world where you said, I see what I can do with this now. I can see what I could do with satellites floating around the world and GPS systems that the military used to run. But I can see this as a way now of getting to my point of destination. But do I want to invent Google Maps and SatNav and GPS constantly for each business? Probably not. But I do want some clarity on how I'm going to use this great technology amongst us. So I think as a CIO, we're trying to establish what's our platforms of choice to allow the business to invent on top of that where they need to go and what they're going to do with it. I think it's going to be a fundamental shift for those choices we then make as technology. But then ultimately the business are going to have to learn in their mind how they're going to use the technology differently than the way they run it today. And it doesn't remove a lot of what historically we talked about anyway, which was good practice, good process, good workflow, good people doing the right things.
Exactly. I had a brilliant quote the other week that someone said, AI is the ingredient, it's not the recipe itself. And I think it's so important, isn't it, for businesses to understand that it's never going to tackle and take away the challenges or the problems within a business. It's actually one of the solutions. But so just focus on what that challenge is first. AI could be the solution. It might not be. But
yeah, there's a lot of good. I think it's starting to mature, even the thinking now. We're having lots of debates about, is AI the right solution for certain problems that actually could be better fixed by workflow, good workflow, by actually we've rebranded something that as an engineer, you'd historically have just called a rules engine. And there's some great kind of decision tree work that's starting to emerge, which is, hang on, let's just understand there's a whole toolkit here. AI is part of that toolkit, but where is there actually good practice that we could bring anyway to areas before we create an AI swarm of activity that we regret from? So I think there's a bit more thinking going into that now. Definitely. I also use the analogy with the internet. When we had the IT department in particular as the provider of the internet. So it was your job as IT to give me the internet. And we used to make allowances for who should and shouldn't have it. So certain people could have the internet access and certain people couldn't, because it was a privilege and a right to have this. And I think we then got into the world of e-commerce and digital, and we said, well, actually, no, it's native to the way I will sell my goods via the internet. So the IT department and the leaders became more digitally savvy to say it's a capability we need to do something with, not an IT department to give me the internet. What do I actually need to build on top of this?
Yeah. As CIO with AI, do you see having to put some kind of governance internally? So obviously we all love playing with technology ourselves as you know, at home and things, but do you see pockets of it popping up, and do you have to kind of create some governance?
Yeah, we're trying. So in Ricoh we've established a AI council, and it's a collaboration between technology, myself, a CEO of Iberia, that's one of our largest markets, and the customer executive. And between the three of us, we're setting up, and it's just starting now actually, a very collaborative council to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and should we be doing it, either to accelerate or to help mitigate certain things. So we're trying to tread that line between collaboratively accelerating good things and challenging ourselves on things that are starting to give us risk or concerns. But we're doing it in a collaborative way, as opposed to we're owning technology versus use cases. Yeah. And that's going to be a journey we're going to go on, I'm sure, over the next few months.
So not just like a top-down, here's what we're directing you to do and use, but actually, like you say,
Yeah, because it creates the debate. So we've got some frameworks in place with technology partners, Microsoft, ServiceNow, great partners that are coming together to say, what's our technology view of how you manage this? And we're using that as our test case to say, well, what can't we use within that we feel doesn't satisfy our needs? And that's starting to create a healthy tension between what we need versus what we already have, and how do we exploit what we're already frankly invested in versus more investment in other tools.
And coming back to the people piece, which is of course completely fundamental to all business today, and like you said, in terms of that technology transformation, having the right people in place, what do you see as the skills that are needed today as more and more this new technology, obviously particularly AI, is coming into the workplace? Do you feel your team and the wider business is equipped with the right skills? How are you searching for those skills?
Yeah, it's. I read a good article the other week. Our roles will be technified, collectively technified, and I think it resonated with me because I think we'll see a definite shift, no matter what role you're in, to a technification of your role. I mean, you mentioned that you play with tools outside of work and you bring that technology into the workplace. I think we'll see an awful lot of roles become more technical by nature. The famous phrase, will AI replace a doctor? Probably not, but it probably will replace a doctor that doesn't use AI. So I think our roles will become natively more technical. Think of our HR teams that today are, historically recruiting people through a lot of, job descriptions and job profiling and searching. They're going to technify that role quite quickly into a much more detailed, automated search, but then add their human in the loop on top to say, I know the culture and I know the people on top.
And touching there on sort of younger people coming to workforce, I know you're particularly passionate about it, and Ricoh's launched its first ever apprentice board. I think you said you've got 8 apprentices that have got sort of advisory roles to the executive team, so that very sort of junior right up to the top. How is Ricoh ensuring that those fresh thoughts and ideas are brought into the company to support the transformation initiatives and your innovation roadmaps?
It's a huge part now because we've got the kind of usual workplace challenges emerging with the kind of aging population remaining in the workplace and even boomeranging back into the workplace post-COVID and everything else. But then we've got our younger generation coming through that are really challenging on the tools and techniques that they need to do their roles. And they're learning the skills in a very different way than the generation before. So we've got reskilling at one end of the spectrum as we navigate, as you mentioned earlier, our transformation. And you may have been a field agent doing X in the old days with hands-on equipment, now becoming a remote operator, potentially fixing stuff on the fly. And you've got young people challenging that. So the UK board have done a brilliant job. They've instilled, as you say, a program with those apprentices, and they've got reverse mentoring going on. And it's creating some great insights into the UK where they're especially pushing on tools to do their job. So to your point about bringing in new tools, they're saying, well, where is this accelerator to learn? And I don't want a PowerPoint slide. I want an interactive system that I can go and learn and prod and poke. Because if I want to learn about something at home, I'll do it on ChatGPT. Yeah, I come into the workplace and I'm learning on a set of books or booklets around standard operating procedures. How do I blend that? And they're giving some really good feedback, especially in the sales organization, where they're trying to uplift people quickly to say, well, help me uplift quickly.
Have you personally sort of tried something new that's been recommended, or?
Yeah, so I'm always trialing stuff. So I'm an optimist with technology, so I'm always trying stuff and breaking stuff, much to the disdain of the team, because then I'm obviously asking them why something doesn't work. But I think building out agents is a really good way to start having a play with some of this stuff, because it's starting to teach you, ironically, what isn't a waste of your time. So it's very interesting to do these things, but we have to remember a lot of people are subject matter experts in their job already. Spending time developing agents is probably not their best use of time, but using it is. So we're trying to have a debate currently about trialing things. So I build a few cottage industry things and quickly get out of my depth, which is brilliant because it illustrates to me where we need engineers versus where we need commodity stuff for people to do their job.
So if you could have your own agent, what would you get them to do?
Yeah, my own agent. So I think the vision here, and it's interesting, is we will all have agents. So if we all had agents, what would we do? Well, you'd have to set them goals. You'd have to set them objectives. You'd have to set them performance targets. So if I was hiring a new member of staff or a new team member, I think I'd go through a similar process with an agent. So I'd think, what am I trying to solve? Why would I have the headcount in the team? And what would I do with this great person? For me personally, most of it would be invested in leading the organization through change. So an agent that could actually describe what people wanted to achieve in a more effective way would be key. We spend a lot of time problem solving. So bringing data together, bringing insight together to more quickly build recommendations would be massive. We spend, like every organization I've been in, a huge amount of time synthesizing opinions and data. The ability to pull together quicker recommendations for decision would be huge.
So Ricoh today, it's become a business around its unified, innovation-driven, modern sort of workplace. But could you bring to life, what does that look like for its customers? What is the modern workplace today, and how you're supporting your customers in that?
Yeah, I think modern workplace can be very different depending on how we support them. So we had examples where we work with retail. Retail, actually, in the modern workplace is the store. So interacting with the store, interacting with customers, stock systems, digital displays, very kind of retail workplace. Then you have your more traditional office workplace where we're thinking about everything from audio-visual to printing to communication services, etc. And I think we're starting to see people define that a lot more cleanly and say what is digital workplace for their employees. And then on top of all of that, you have your traditional make my life easy side of workplace, which is, as we all do with satisfaction surveys, and I do myself for 15,000 people who are in Ricoh Europe, where I provide digital workplace myself to Ricoh, we say, what do people want? And it's often feedback, make my life easy, make it easy on my equipment, make it easy on my services, but also easy on my processes. How do I approve things? How do I gain access? How do I start an onboarding process quickly? So at Ricoh, we're looking at processes for the workplace, as well as then the experience of the physical side of the workplace to get work done.
And when someone comes to you and says, like, just make my life easy, Nick, come on, make it easier. Do you often just go back to them and say, well, is your data clean? Let's focus, because I think a lot of people just forget that they're not getting the right answer. They're making their life harder because they haven't really put in the right data to start with.
Yeah.
Is that one of your sort of typical answers?
We do. The devil is in the detail, definitely, because when we do, and we all do the kind of, we want the satisfaction, and it's survey data to say, make my life easy. And you go, for example, the approval process. In every company, you'll say, oh, it's so hard to get things approved. And then you say, in the IT and the services, how do you know, is that going to help me? And you realize that when you dig into it, the system to a certain degree and the processes are probably okay, but as a company, we've probably put in 4 layers of approvals into the approval system. So you start having to have a real collaborative conversation with your process teams and your services teams to say, we would love to have an easier way to approve things, but we also have to streamline why we have 4 approvals to procure X products. So I think we're trying to be a bit more collaborative in the sense, most of the technology is working pretty well, but then we add processes on top of it that unpick that. Data is a great example. Hierarchies, great experience of, if you haven't got the right data, the right hierarchies, no wonder the approval process takes so long, because we're all over the place in who works for who, and your management hierarchies aren't set up correctly. So you're right, it can definitely be a combination of technology and process to make it easier.
And do you think as well, with the combination of technology and people, the sort of 4 layers of approval have come about because of the insistence of, obviously we want human in the loop, but rather than streamline, taking away and just having those, the technology and then the people approval, we're just adding layers to try and protect ourselves?
Yeah. It becomes legacy process debt almost, where every person that touches a process, and a bit like meetings in your calendar, it's easy to put another layer in. It's harder to then take the meeting out. So once it's in, it's often in the system and the processes. So we do think AI will help with some of this, but this is exactly where we need to be careful, because AIing on top of an orchestrating a process is brilliant because it'll feel easier, but what we've actually done is orchestrate and what is a process that probably could have been streamlined equally. So we have a few working groups now that are challenging on that simplification side, because the system is where it often manifests, and you go, oh God, this system and technology is driving me nuts. The work group is actually trying to unpick, is it the system and the technology, or is it the workflow that's supported it?
So you touched there on sort of the digital workplace today. Could you give us an example of where you think the digital workplace is going?
Yeah, I think, and I'll blend a few things together where it's going, because I think if we look right into the future, I'll use an example. I use a simple example in Ricoh language of kind of document management. If you think of the generational shift of, scanning documents, storing documents, printing documents into now document management workflow systems, you start to say, okay, we've automated to a certain degree what was work. That was work that went into the system, from post rooms all the way through to actually doing something with the document. If you look totally into the crystal ball, and we're looking at some partners where we look at technology for this, really what I really care about is what the document is telling me and what I need to worry about. So if you think about a contract that might go through this process, storing it somewhere is not that useful. What's really useful is some kind of technology that could tell me what the sentiment of that document says. So it's a legal contract, for example, and that contract is probably beautifully written and perfect and no risk at all, or probably got some real areas that X people in legal or procurement or the CEO should probably be really aware of. So technology that takes documents from storage workflow and into you need to be aware of the following 3 things about this document is very different than just sending a note out for approval of a document. So we think a kind of marketplace where we're looking at technologies that give customers things like sentiment analysis on documents in their workflow is much more powerful than just here's some workflow documents to approve.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I guess the more and more, like you say, you put one contract in, you're going to get a certain amount of analysis sentiment out about it. But you add in perhaps 3 years worth of that one company's contracts, it's going to paint you a very different picture of perhaps the evolution of how those two parties work together, how the contracts change, how things, perhaps terms in the contracts got lost as time went on. That can paint a really useful, very proactive intelligence for somebody to make decisions for the future.
Yeah, because we rely today, if you think about it, we rely today on our lovely skilled people doing some of the hard work there, which is we've had previous contracts that didn't go well, so we've got experience in our brains and knowledge, we've got out-of-date work, we've also got industry insight. So if you take our legal colleagues, laws changing, regulations changing all the time. So if you could bring together some of these elements that can automate and check to a certain degree all of that to show you where you need to focus, you're highly likely to then get a better result. So I think that kind of smart intelligence rather than just automation would make the workplace easier again, because you're drawing into the areas you need to spend your time, not on the work that goes before it.
Definitely. This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, Nick. I've really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
You've been listening to the latest episode of the ServiceNow Executive Circle podcast. I'm the host, Kat Finch. Thank you for listening.